Right, so surprise, surprise, Gord's going to show you a quick matrix game about how we can combine ecology and evolution to predict the evolution of defense. So the idea then is we're going to take this 2x2 matrix game. And often matrix games are really good for, like, if you can boil the problem down to do a thing, don't do a thing. So have defense, don't have defense. And you can imagine that this is going to have different consequences for individuals within a population, right? So, you could imagine that if everyone's defended, maybe that's not so good. But if you are the defended plant and your neighbors are not defended, that's going to be really, really useful to you, right? And so you can imagine that all of these different possible worlds that are described by the 4 cells of the matrix game have really different consequences for individuals, right? This individual in a world where his neighbors are all defended is probably going to get hammered. This guy in a world where none of his neighbors have defense is probably going to do really well. And then maybe different things happen here. So this is actually from an old paper that was actually published in an animal behavior journal, which I think is really cool. So this guy, Magnus Ogner, had a series of papers about defense that I think are some of the nicest papers about matrix games, and then he just seems to have disappeared. I don't know what happened to him. So the idea is there are 2 strategies, right? Either a plant has some kind of defense. It could be any of the 4 types. The math doesn't really care. The idea is that every one of those 4 types of defense we discussed potentially reduce the negative impacts of herbivory, but they all come at a cost, right? If you're going to have a chemical defense, you have to pay for it, right? You have to spend some of your carbon on chemical defense. If you are going to have spines, well, you have to pay for those spines too. And then the other plant has no defense, and then maybe it doesn't pay for it, right? So what are the costs and benefits of this? Well, the benefits are probably the same for all of these plants, right? They're all going to do photosynthesis and make, right? So they're all going to have leaves and roots and potentially get fruit, just like in the board game you were playing. So a lot of that's going to cancel in the math. So Ogner only put in the costs. So getting attacked by an herbivore is a cost. So we have minus H if you get attacked. Making a chemical also has a cost, right? So it's C. You have to spend some of your carbon and probably some of your nitrogen and other compounds to create either spines or regrow tissue or make a chemical defense or attract a parasitoid wasp. All of that has a cost. And then maybe there's some probability that an herbivore finds you, right? An herbivore probably doesn't attack every plant in the population. There's some probability between 0 and 1 that the herbivore is going to find you, and we'll call that M, or Ogner called that M. And then he made a simplifying assumption, which mathematicians often do. And let's just say if the plants have defense, the herbivores know it, and they do not attack them. That's probably not how it works in the real world. And actually, some of his follow-up papers, which I'm not going to show you, he relaxed this assumption. This is often what mathematicians do. We make the simplest assumption, find the answers, and then we start relaxing assumptions and see what the consequences of that are. But we're not going to do that in this class. So you can start to imagine, how do we fill in these cells? And if we were together, I would ask you, right? So a defended plant, we know it doesn't get attacked, so no H, no M. All the defended plants have is they're going to have a minus C as their cost, whereas the defended plants are going to have some probability of getting attacked, M, and if they are attacked, then they get H, and so the way to have that is M times H. And remember, these are only costs. The benefits are the same, so they cancel. What's our defended plant versus a no defense plant going to have? Well, it's going to be the same, right? It's just minus C. And then Ogner figured that, okay, well, if you're living in a population where you are, nobody's defended, there's going to be a 50-50 chance that you're the one that it gets attacked, right? So the herbivore finds the patch where the 2 plants are, flips a coin, and attacks one of these guys on average. So this is the basic matrix game. And you guys know how to work out the solutions of when each of these strategies would be ESS. And in fact, what Ogner found, and what he actually shows in his paper, I redrew it because it's a little more clear, is that in this particular form of the game, you have these different solutions that are pretty intuitive, I think, right? So if the cost of defense is low and the cost of an attack is high, well, you should probably defend yourself. Again, this is really intuitive, right? I mean, I feel like if I told you that getting attacked was really expensive, but defending yourself was really cheap, what do you want to do? Well, you'd probably decide to defend yourself. Similarly, if the cost of defense is incredibly expensive, for whatever reason, the chemical that the plant wants to create is expensive, but there's almost no chance of being attacked, well, there's no reason to defend yourself. Maybe you get attacked, maybe you don't. Let's roll the dice. And then there's this cool area in this game where actually the 2 of them can coexist, which remember, we didn't see that in the competition game that I showed you. So what I'd like you guys to do, I'll put up some survey type things. I skipped a lot of steps here, right? If we were actually going to solve this, right? Remember, to check which is which, we have to start comparing up and down what the solutions are to figure out the space. And so what I would like you guys to do is sit down and figure out how I got these answers. So I'm gonna show you all. If you don't care, go ahead and just look at the answers. But the goal is that you should be able to figure this out. I'm never going to ask you to remember, just like I don't want you to remember equations for population ecology. But I do want you to be able to work with those equations. So I don't care if you remember this game, but if I gave it to you on an exam, I would want you to be able to solve it. So you don't need to remember this game, but you do need to remember how to solve it. So you should be able to figure out, how did I get from this matrix game, which I've shown you, through all the solutions, which I've also shown you, to make this graph. And I'm going to suggest that you sit down and actually do the work and see if you can come up with the same answer. And then I will, I'll make something on Blackboard that walks you through it. So let's stop the video here. And on the other side, we'll think about population level consequences. So these are individual level consequences. Let's think about population level consequences like we did for competition.